Welcome everyone, Questini here with a discussion about the Wood Elves in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Out of the 3 elven races, and out of all the races in the game, I would say that the Wood Elves are the single most boring race to play, or at the very least to win a campaign as, because of the specifics they have to deal with in that particular campaign. This is not to say that the Wood Elves aren't necessarily thematic to what they should be in the lore, or that the Wood Elves are a weak race. They are not a weak race. In fact, they are so strong that they trivialize how the game is played. So let me explain on that subject. We look at their hero roster. Yes, they're lacking a melee hero, which is not as big of a problem as you might think it is, because of their range capability. Though keep in mind, Wood Elves have a lot of melee capability as well. In particular because one of their lore choices is literally an Ent. A really powerful Ent that would give Treebeard a run for his money. And one of their lore choices, legendary lore choices, is literally Treebeard with a freaking massive sword that obliterates everything in his path. So there is a significant amount of power in terms of the Wood Elf hero roster. You got heroes with campaign movement range, training, replenishment, and just a magic user. Though it is annoying to get spell slingers because you do have to spend those precious surplus points in order to increase capacity for them. But outside of that particular annoyance, they do have a good selection of heroes. They do have some really powerful lords. Not necessarily the best selection of lords, because, yeah, 2 variants of Glade Lord, 1 caster hero, and the Ancient Treeman, which is better than all the others combined, it does not necessarily lend itself to diversity. And for the record, you benefit a lot from having Ancient Treemen, not just because of their combat ability, but because of the sheer ridiculous crap that they offer, like 20% ward save for a really powerful melee unit. Or monster infantry unit, that's how I would describe tree spirits of Athol Lorem. So they have a good selection of heroes, they have some, at least one really powerful lore choice, so the others aren't necessarily bad, it's just like the Ancient Treemens are just much better than the other choices that are available. In terms of units, the only thing that they're lacking is artillery, but they have ranged dominance and even really good melee units, because things like blade singers will, while they do lack the armor of certain other units, they can do so much damage in melee it's not even funny. And besides, they have physical resistance. They have good cavalry choices. They have ranged flying units with hawk riders, and if gyrocopters have taught us anything in the last period, is that flying range units can really dominate the meta of the game. So there is a huge level of power over here. The lack of artillery can be a problem, but you genuinely have some of the best range units in the game and some of the best melee units in the game. Things like Treekin, consider Treekin, they're very, very durable. And even against fire, which should be their vulnerability, well, given how fire units actually work, you think of flamethrowers, is not necessarily too big of a problem to actually deal with them. These guys are absurd. High leadership, high durability, significant level of stats capability like missile resistance, physical resistance, and yeah, don't ignore that 20% ward save that they can get from Ancient Treemen. And they have a freaking dragon. Maybe not the best dragon in the world, but they do at least have it. So and really good cavalry with things like Great Stag Knights, which are actually quite a lot better. They're shock cavalry to be sure, but they're quite good at getting the job done. So it's not a unit roster issue. If it was a unit roster issue, it might be a bit too powerful, but really, there are ways to counter it. The problem of the Wood Elves, well, there are several issues that do come into focus with the Wood Elves in their campaigns that make them so boring to play. First off, Wood Elves don't care about regular settlements, because regular settlements are going to offer pretty much very little at all. The most substantial benefit you can get from minor settlements is the fact that they can heal a forest, and they can give you various growth and construction benefits for nearby trees. But these trees, they are absurd. Not only do they have some pretty powerful garrisons, even if you don't have the garrison building, not only are they difficult to take, their actual defensive layout, the way that the maps are for these trees when you actually fight a battle in them, make them the most defensible locations in the game. I'm not joking. Sieges for me personally in Warhammer 3 are very easy to deal with. The only type of quote-unquote siege that I'm actually concerned about when I'm facing it is these trees that the Wood Elves do have. Because between the garrisons, their powerful ranged units, and the way the map is designed, where it's an open map but there's a lot of choke points, it makes it difficult to assault. You can certainly do so, don't get me wrong, it's still a siege with all the issues that come with it from an AI perspective, but these are certainly some of the most difficult siege battles in the game. In fact, they're the only difficult siege battles in the game. And that is saying quite a bit about how all the other siege maps are and how useless walls are in the game. So those are all very significant strengths. And then you consider the various legendary lords. Durfu with Wallbreaker, Draika with her malevolent forest spirits, which are treekin but amped up to 11 or 12. The Sisters of Twilight with their cruise missiles on their Hawk Riders. Again, ranged units. Flying ranged units have proven themselves to be really powerful. And the Sisters of Twilight have the best flying range units in the game. Yes, you think gyrocopters and gyrobombers are ridiculous? No. Sisters of Twilight Hawk Riders are the most ridiculous flying range units in the game. Like, if I were to pick between that and Thunder Barges, I would pick the Hawk Riders. The reason is cost. Part of it is really down to cost, because these guys are significantly cheaper to maintain than, Thunder Barges. And while one of these may not necessarily take down a Thunder Barge, so don't underestimate them. As long as they have enough ammo, they can outrange it, and they can defeat a Thunder Barge, potentially. So just keep that aspect in mind with regards to the keep, at least for the Sisters of Twilight, keep that in mind. So all that is great. But what's the problem? Well, the problem is, because the Wood Elves don't care about regular settlements, and because they have very strong and defensive settlements, they are rarely challenged. The AI is unwilling many times to even attack one of your principal settlements. And even when they do so with such an overwhelming force if you let them. So basically, it is very difficult to screw up a Wood Elven campaign. And so, because of that particular situation, it is very difficult to lose a campaign. But that's one of the problems. The other problem is what the Wood Elves actually do in those campaigns in order to win. This is really the difference between, say, Wood Elves and Warriors of Chaos, because you could apply a lot of these criticisms to Warriors of Chaos as well. Really powerful unit roster, very defensible locations, very difficult to attack. Absolutely. But the difference is, the Wood Elves are worse, from my point of view, from this perspective, in the sense that their campaigns, while thematic, in the sense of playing defensive and playing tall and all that, don't offer any substantial amount of challenge. And on top of that, they literally are the in-turn button simulator. Because in order to win any Wood Elven campaign, what you need to do is basically revive the tree over here in the Oak of Ages. Now, the way you do this is you have to restore various forests around the map. The way you do so is by taking over heathlands next to these forests, getting a lot of forest health, doing a ritual where rogue armies that are, for the most part, free experience to spawn, dealing with those, obliterating them, healing the forest, and then restoring the Oak of Ages. Not only is this not challenging at all, because again, you have very strong defenses, even though there are some powerful armies you will have, they're still rogue armies. They don't have an empire backing them. And you can always pick and choose how you fight those battles. You are in full control of that situation. And you end up in a very boring campaign dynamic where you're just pressing the enter button without very little on offer. Even if you are very aggressive in a Wood Elven campaign, you realize you're never at risk of losing. Oh, you lost an army. Sure, it might take quite a few turns to recruit another one, because Wood Elves do have limited recruitment slots, but you're never really at risk of losing your principal settlements. And this is where the problem comes in. Without that level of challenge, and with a campaign victory condition that more or less incentivizes you to sit on your ass and do nothing, you end up in a really boring campaign. I think that Creative Assembly's intent was good, and I certainly think it's much better than what the Wood Elves had beforehand, but when you incentivize the player to play the intern button simulator, that is not a good dynamic. And you don't even have the great diplomacy benefit that some other factions do, because one of the key aspects of making diplomacy work is through training settlements. But because you're always taking settlements at tier 1, well, part of the problem is you have no penalty for sacking these settlements before you take them, occupying them, and you will benefit significantly from that. And you can always settle the territory you don't need for allies, giving you an extra layer of protection. Also, all Wood Elven campaigns kind of end up playing the same way, despite the so-called diverse starts. Because yeah, you have Draika and Sister starting in different positions, but in almost every Wood Elven campaign, you want to end up doing the same thing. Go over here to Cafe, fight one battle against Cafe faction, set up over here to heal the forests, and get this particular landmark, getting that minus 30% upkeep for forest spirit units, which includes Streakin. Also, there is the issue that, yeah, Orion is completely broken with his minus 4% upkeep for all armies for every war he declares. So you are incentivized to just screw around the campaign map, declaring war on a lot of factions that have no chance of hurting you in any way, shape, or form. And building the order tide and always being safe, never having any risk to deal with during the course of your campaigns. And that is where the problems really start kicking in. It is not a great campaign dynamic. You need to have something that you're risking in order to win a campaign. Because if you're just playing the intern button simulator, that is not a really fun and entertaining campaign experience. And I do believe that playing tall should not be equivalent to sitting on your ass doing nothing. That is not what playing tall should be defined as. But that is exactly how the Wood Elves play out their campaigns. They are worse than the High Elves. Now, the High Elves at least do have to deal with challenges. They do have to take risks. The Wood Elves don't have those risks, and yet their basic late guard are just as strong, if not stronger, than the High Elven archers with light armor, but they don't even have the same level of risk that the High Elves have in their campaigns. They do have a better hero recruitment situation, to be sure, though I have to say the offices, they alternate between being really good and being completely freaking useless in a lot of campaigns, and that is just not overall a great dynamic to be dealing with. Costin signing out. Stay tuned for more.